Hey guys, thank you so much for coming to my channel. If you haven't been here before, thank you for coming back. And if this is your first time, thank you for stopping by. My name is Nicole and I am a Scrum Master. On today's topic, we're going to talk about backlog refinement, also known as backlog grooming. So what is your backlog refinement? A backlog refinement is a meeting that happens in the middle of your sprint. You can actually decide to have your refinement anytime that you want, but I normally schedule my refinement session in the middle of the sprint. So let's say your sprint started on a Thursday. So I will schedule my refinement the following week, like on a Wednesday. If you're running a 2-week sprint, make sure you schedule at least 2 refinements for that 2-week sprint. The whole purpose or the goal of having your refinement is for your entire team to pretty much come together to understand the work that's coming up in the next sprint. So your refinement is always to pretty much focus on what is supposed to be coming up in the next sprint. When your entire team gets together, the developers are going to go over the stories that are going to be coming up in the next sprint. Based on what the product owner says, these are the must-have items. They'll review each and every one of the story, and they will be asking a lot of questions just to make sure that they get the clarity that they need. So that way, when they get into the sprint planning, they might not be having too many questions at that time. So it's really, really important that you schedule the backlog refinement to happen once a week for your 2-week sprint. So you will have 2 backlog refinement sessions for your 2-week sprint. For a 2-week sprint, I normally schedule my backlog refinement for about an hour. So that's a 2 hours refinement session for the 2-week sprint that we're going to be having. Just make sure that you schedule that session and invite all the participants. So who are your participants? You want to make sure that you invite, obviously, the product owner, because that's the person that knows like what is to be built. The product owner knows exactly the product, like what is to be built, and also knows the priority of the work, what your team should focus on every single sprint. So please do make sure that you invite the product owner to the backlog refinement meeting. You also might need to invite someone from the business, like your stakeholders. Find out from the product owner if you need to invite someone from the business to represent during the backlog refinement meeting. I've actually worked on a team where I didn't have to invite someone from the business because the product owner has been from the business. They can usually answer all the questions that the team may have. I've also worked on a team where the product owner has not been from the business, so they have asked me to invite somebody from the business. Normally, the product owner will tell you who from the business to invite. If you do need to invite someone from the business, make sure that you do invite them, because it's very, very important that if you guys need someone to really come to the meeting to be answering all these questions for your team members, make sure that you do invite that individual, so that way your team can get all the clarity that they need, all the doubt, all the concern, all the questions that they have, they can get them answered during that meeting. So you want to invite the product owner. If you do need someone from the business, make sure you invite the person from the business. You definitely want to invite your entire development team members. It makes sense because these are the people that are going to be doing the work. So make sure you invite all your development team members. So if they do have any questions, they can come to that meeting and ask those questions and get all the answers that they need. With a good backlog refinement, you guys are going to have a very good sprint planning, right? So some of the benefits of having your backlog refinement is just pretty much to reduce the time that you guys are going to be spending in your sprint planning meeting, and also for your team members to really pretty much look ahead and understand the work that's going to be coming up in the next sprint, so they can ask all the questions. If the stories are too big, right? Because the whole point is to make sure that we are only accepting a story that can be fit or the team can achieve in the next 2 weeks. So if the team member know that the story is not going to be achieved in the next 2 weeks, During the refinement session, they can split that story, they can break it down into different stories, just so that way the work can be achieved in the next 2 weeks. So your backlog refinement session is an ongoing process. It's a meeting that's going to be happening every sprint. So just make sure that if you're having a 2-week sprint, to schedule at least a 2 backlog refinement meeting for your team to get together, understand the work that's going to be coming up next, so they can get all the clarity that they need. They can ask all the questions that they may have. So what I normally actually do before we go to the actual refinement session is I normally schedule like a 30-minute call the day before my refinement sessions, just to make sure that I understand the stories that are going to be coming up in the next sprint, so that way my product owner, myself, and the tech lead can pre-prioritize. So I normally schedule like a 30-minute call the day before the actual refinement, invite the product owner, myself, and the tech lead, just to make sure that we pre-prioritize, just to make sure that we understand the stories that are going to be coming up in the next sprint refinement session. The reason I do this is to make sure that we don't go to the refinement sessions and we don't have idea of what we should focus on, right? So I do this to save a lot of time. So when we get into the refinement, we know exactly what stories we should focus on. So normally when we meet the day before, I'll just write down all the high priority work that my team members are going to be reviewing during the refinement session. There's actually one technique I've used for backlog prioritization. There are different techniques. I've used this technique called the Moscow technique. So when I normally meet for that 30-minute with the product owner, I usually just use the Moscow technique and ask the product owner, what are the must-have items? What are the work that's adding value to the business? What are the stories that we need to focus on during the next sprint? So the Moscow technique pretty much has like the must have, the should have, the could have, and the won't have. The must have just means the work that's adding value, the stories that the team needs to focus on in the next sprint, the high priority work. The should have just means these are less impactful. These are stories that, yeah, they're important, but they're less impactful. The team maybe don't really need to focus on this in the next sprint. And the won't have just simply means these are stories that pretty much we don't really need to even focus on right now at all. So when I meet with my product owner, I always just ask them, what are the must-have items? What are the stories that are adding value to the business? Please list the stories, so that way when we meet in our refinement, we want to review those stories with the entire team. When we actually get to the backlog refinement session itself, what really happens? When we get to the meeting, first of all, I want to make sure that I schedule that meeting for at least an hour. So for a 2-week sprint, I will schedule a 1-hour refinement session for each of the refinement sessions. So for 2 refinement sessions, we'll have a 2 hours refinement. So just make sure that you're having it at least once a week before your next sprint. So the whole point of having your refinement session is to make sure that these stories has clear definitions, the team understands the definition, they understand the acceptance criteria, and they're able to estimate the work. Estimating just means that the team is able to achieve this work in the next sprint. They're able to commit and accomplish this work in the next 2 weeks. So we want to make sure that whatever work they're bringing to the sprint is def ready. It just means that the story has met our definition of ready. We want to make sure that the story meets the definition of ready before we are pulling that story into the sprint. And for us to get the story to ready is during the refinement session. The team will ask so many questions. They will be creating more stories if they have to create more stories, if they have to split the story, if they have to estimate the story. So the whole point is to make this story dev ready, so that way we can work on it in the next sprint. So what really happens in the backlog refinement itself? Once you get to your refinement meeting, the first thing you want to definitely do is you want to make sure you always greet the people that you've invited to the meeting. Greet everyone and thank them for coming to the meeting. Once you start the meeting, who can really facilitate this meeting? The Scrum Master can facilitate this meeting. The product owner can also facilitate this meeting as well. And I've also had a business analyst as well that has been facilitating a refinement session. However, if you, the Scrum Master, is the one facilitating the meeting, just make sure you have a subject matter expert in the meeting, someone that really understands the priority of the work, someone that really understands the work really well, someone that understands the product that the team is building, so that way they can answer all the questions that your team may have, right? Or just make sure that you have, if you're facilitating the Scrum Master, if you're the one facilitating the meeting, just make sure that you have maybe the product owner in the meeting as well that can help the team to answer all the questions that they need. Or just make sure that you have someone from the business, like a stakeholder, somebody that really knows the work, understand the product, that can really answer all the questions for your team. So once you get into your meeting, after you've greeted everyone, now you can log into Jira. If you're the one facilitating the meeting, you log into Jira, you share your screen to the entire team, and then you go through each and every one of the story one by one, all the high priority story, all the must-have items. Open up the first must-have items, read the description. You can simply just read the story out loud to everyone and just ask them to, if they have any question, if they have any comment, then they can go ahead and discuss. They can go ahead, talk about it. The whole point is to make sure that the team really understand the detail of the story, they understand the acceptance criteria, and they can estimate the work. Okay, so when you're done going over the first story, just ask the team, do you guys have any question regarding this story? They will normally start talking immediately right after you ask them if they have any question. Once you're done, the next thing I would do, if I really know that the team really has understood like all the detail really well, the next thing that I will do, I'll just ask the team if they can estimate the story. If the team is not able to estimate the story at this point, maybe if they need more clarity from someone else, what I would normally do is we can maybe estimate the story during our sprint planning. However, if they are able to estimate the story during the refinement session, there's this technique that I have used to estimate stories, which is the planning poker and the Fibonacci sequence. The planning poker is pretty much a game, right? It's a game that the team pretty much play. It's a card, right? The card has numbers in the back. The numbers in the back are the Fibonacci sequence. The number goes from 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. It can get even big. It can get bigger and bigger and bigger. The whole point is to make sure that when our team members are estimating stories, we want to make sure that they're only estimating what they can commit and accomplish in the next 2 weeks. Our sprint only lasts for 10 days. So if your team members are estimating any story 13 and above, I always encourage them to split the story, to break down the story into smaller story, to break down the story into subtasks, so that way they can achieve that work in the next 2 weeks. The way our story estimation are pretty much based on the complexity of the story, uncertainty, and risk. So once my team member go through the first story, I'll ask them, based on your understanding of this story, what is the estimation of this story? So normally I'll set up the poker game and send them the link. They can just log in and play the game, and then the numbers will appear in front of the screen. One number the team or each of them decide, it will appear in front of the screen. Once I notice that the numbers are different, for instance, let's say if someone estimates a story of 2 points and someone estimates a story of 5, I'll just ask the people that estimated the story 2 to just give their explanation of why they think this story is 2 over 5. They'll go ahead and give the reasoning behind why the estimated story of 2. Once they're done, I will ask the other people that estimated the story of 5 for them to also explain why they think that this story is going to take more time, more days than the people that estimated the 2. Once they're done also explaining why, then I'm going to ask the entire team if they want to play poker one more time. The whole point is to make sure that the team comes to an agreement, right? The whole point is to make sure that everyone really understands why this person thought is a 2 or why this person thinks is a 5. So I'll have them play the poker one more time. The whole point is to make sure that they come to an agreement. Once they do come to an agreement of whatever estimation they all decide to do to estimate that story, I will go ahead and mark that story. Let's say if they decided that the story is 5 story points, I will now go on Jira next to the story where it says story point and put in 5. It just means this story has been estimated 5 story points. Once I'm done going over that first story, the first must-have item, I'll go to the next must-have item on the list. We'll do the same thing. Read the story description to everyone. Let them understand. Let them ask questions. Once they're done, we can estimate it as well. If they're not ready to estimate, we can wait and estimate the story during the sprint planning meeting. All the stories that the team understand very well, they're able to estimate very well, we can now mark those stories dev ready. Dev ready just means this story is ready for the team to start the development work after the sprint planning meeting. It just means that the team understands the detail really well. They understand the acceptance criteria very, very well. They're able to commit and accomplish this work in the next 2 weeks. So during the refinement sessions, if any story is really big, try to encourage your team to break down the story. If the team thinks that this story is going to take them more than 2 weeks of work, just make sure that you educate them to split the story down into smaller stories so they can achieve in the next 2 weeks. Guys, that's pretty much it about my backlog refinement meeting. If you do have any specific comments, any specific topic you want me to talk about, do go ahead, leave me a message below. You can also email me at Nicole.agilepractitioner@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you guys soon.